there may be some of you here who are literally brand new. You got thrown into this process, and you may be very unfamiliar with the FDS system, how it looks, what the menus are. So the third part is going to be just a real brief overview of what the system is, where do you find, what do you find, how do you do? All right, how do you do? Buckle up. Are you ready? All right, so let's get started with talking first about the financial disclosure process here. I want to make sure that I have my notes. Now, first of all, what is an FDS form? For those of you who are brand new, we use the acronym FDS because financial disclosure statements is quite a mouthful. So that's your first acronym check for the day. Now, the FDS is technically a publicly available document. All right, that's an important thing for your filers to know. However, it is confidential in a lot of ways. But the whole purpose of the FDS form is to provide transparency and to give a mechanism to try to find any potential conflicts of interest before it becomes a problem, right? So that's what it's all about. Sometimes you have to kind of soothe your new employees when they find out that they're subject to this. But one thing you can share with them is that over 30,000 state employees statewide have to file an FDS, so they're in good company. There's a lot of folks who have to do this. So, don't make them feel like this is it's only them. It's not. There's lots of folks have to file. So, but by and large, your employees are going to be FDS filers because they meet one of two criteria. The first criteria is that your agency has designated them as a policymaker, right? Now, that's an agency-level decision. That's not a JCOPE decision. Sometimes filers don't understand that either. I'm not a policymaker. I don't have anything to do with policy. We do have a guidance document available for ethics officers and agency counsel. It's a guidance document, but it can give you some ways to determine which positions ought to be considered policymakers. So that we don't post on our website, but if you want that policy document, send an email to education and we will give you a copy of that. Or legal, I think legal can get that for you too. So they're either a policymaker or they're a threshold filer. The threshold, the salary threshold, if they exceed that salary threshold, they're a filer. That salary threshold is pegged to the CSCA salary grade 24. Excuse me. I should have mentioned that I'm just getting over a cold. Pardon me. So I'm going to turn bright red and lose my voice, but all is well. All right, so now one of the things you should know is if they're a new filer, if they meet the criteria in this current year, they have to file for the previous year. And that sometimes is a thing that a new employee won't understand. I just started the job. What do you mean I have to report last year's stuff? I wasn't even working there. Wow. All right, it'll come back. But the FDS is a backward-looking document, and that's the purpose of that. Now, I said that the salary threshold is pegged to CSCA salary grade 24. Here's the current chart. Goodness gracious. All right, so here's the current chart. You can see that as of April 1st of this year, the threshold is going to rise to 99,394. It's currently set at 97,448. Next year, in 2020, CSCA should be negotiating a new contract. So if you have a lot of threshold filers, that's the thing to pay attention to. It's regardless of whether you're in CSCA, PEP, or any particular union. We just needed a benchmark for setting that threshold, and that's what the threshold is. Okay, don't pay me. I'm going on vacation next week. All right, so we'll get to this. All right. Now, one question that sometimes people ask is, well, if I've got a new employee, but they're only a part-time employee, are they still required to file? And it does depend. It's a maybe. It depends on whether they're being hired on a permanent part-time basis or if they're opting to voluntarily reduce their hours to part-time in order to fall below the threshold. If it's a permanent part-time job and their salary is below the threshold and it will not exceed it, then no, they don't have to file. But if it's a full-time position that would make them required to file and they're just opting to reduce their hours, then no. All right, what are the deadlines? The deadlines depend on what kind of filer you have. By and large, for most people, the filing deadline is May 15th. That is the big one. And it's the way I often say in trainings when I'm talking to FDS filers is think about it as just being 1 month after your taxes. When your tax returns are due, just keep all that paperwork together and just get started on your FDS. Now, for academic filers are generally CUNY or SUNY professors. They have a November filing deadline, mainly because mid-May is right in the middle of their academic final exams and graduation, so they have a different filing deadline. So most of the things, most people are May 15th. On the handout that has the important dates, you'll see those important dates are broken down depending on whether they're academic or non-academic filers, because those two due dates then determine all of the other actions for those filers. Now, when you're adding a brand new staff to the FDS system, what will their FDS deadline due date be? And it does depend on when they are added to the system. So, this is just kind of a quirk of the way the system functions. So if you add them between January and April, the first few months of the year, then they're going to be due by May 15th. But if you add them between April and December, then they have to file within 30 days. So it's basically within that first 3 months, they kind of get given a little bit of extra time. If they're outside that window, once you add them, they'll have 30 days to file for the previous year. So we have something similar for academic filers, but their window, because of the way it works, is much longer. So if they're added between January and October, November 15th is the date. But if they get added to the system October through December, then they have that same 30-day window. So it's just a quirk. You don't need to memorize that, but to know where to look that up if you have a filer with a question about that. Right.
I don't see the slides there anymore, but it's information in here.
Yes, all of that. Yes, we will be posting this presentation on the website. I didn't give you copies of it because I was literally working on this up until yesterday. But we will be making this material available on the website because it will have lots of useful stuff like that for you. Now, filers can request an extension of time for filing. If something comes up and they can't get their FDS in on time, they can request an extension of time. It's based on justifiable cause or undue hardship, right? They have to give some sort of explanation of their reason. And the deadline for requesting that extension is the same as the deadline for filing. So just like with your taxes, if you need an extension, you have to request that extension by the filing date, right? So filers can ask for an extension themselves directly through the FDS system. They go to their profile and there's a button that they can click to request an extension. But we also have a paper form available on our website for those filers who feel less comfortable with technology. So that is also a mechanism they can use. Now, some filers can request to be exempt from the filing requirement entirely. And I say some because this option is not available to a policymaker. If you're a policymaker, you must file, full stop, no ifs, ands, or buts. But if you have filers who are filers just by virtue of their salary, those are the population of people who may request an exemption. Now, many of you will know they are not granted automatically. They are each request is examined individually, and we have to look at what their job duties are and then weigh that against public interest. But exemptions are possible, and again, those exemptions can be requested through the website or through the FDS system or from a paper form that they can download from our website. what happens if you get an exemption? Sometimes people ask us questions about, well, how long does it last? What circumstances might make that exemption go away? So pretty much the exemption holds for as long as they are still acting in that same job title, in the same capacity, and their job duties haven't changed at all. As long as nothing has changed, that is generally what's going to hold, right? But if they get appointed to a new job title, then all bets are off. Now we have to look at the circumstances all over again. If the title changes or the duties change, anything like that, those are circumstances that we might need to re-examine the exemption. Oh, and I shouldn't overlook, it is one of the responsibilities of the ethics officer to notify us if there has been significant changes in a job title, so that we can, especially if there's more than one person holding that job title, so that we can examine that and make sure that the exemption is still appropriate. Okay? All right, so with that kind of overview information packed into your brain pan, let's look at some of the key tasks that ethics officers need to perform in order to manage all of these filers. So the first and perhaps the most important is your annual review and certification to us. And what that means is once a year, ethics officers have to review the list of all of the active filers in their agency, make any updates and changes, people who have gone, people who've joined, and certify that to us every year by the end of February. And that's because we don't know salary information. We don't know who you have designated as policymakers. We can only process FDS forms for people that you tell us meet those criteria. So this is an annual requirement. It's a really important one. We spend a lot of effort making sure that our lists are updated, all right? Now, because we are going to be communicating with FDS filers, it's also really important that you notify us of any changes. So if there's been any information about a filer that has changed, their salary or anything really, you're supposed to update them within the FDS system within 30 days, especially if we are in communication with the filer, maybe they're delinquent. Knowing their updated information is really critical for us to be able to communicate with them effectively. All right, and then the third really important function is notification, and really that's communication. We want you to be communicating with your FDS filers, especially when they're brand new and you're just adding them. They're new employees, they don't know any of this stuff, and it's very confusing to them. And if the first thing they hear about this requirement of filing of FDS form is from our little automated courtesy emails that start getting spit out of the system, then they get confused, they get upset, they don't know what's going on, or they just think that our email is spam and they just hit delete. A whole range of things. So best practice has really shown that if you do the initial outreach when at time of hire and say, hey, you're going to be required to file financial disclosure forms, that means that you're also going to be required to complete ethics training, and you will be notified by JCOPE about those requirements, that's usually sufficient. But give them a heads up. Don't let it come as a surprise, because that's not nice. All right, so important dates. Another one of your handouts is lists the important dates and when various functions need to happen. So the first is the review of the agency list. So we're going to ask, we sent you an email in January, right? We sent you an email in January saying, hey, it's that time of year again. It's time to start reviewing your list of active filers and making any updates. So we sent that out for non-academic filers in January. For academic filers, those notices go out in August. And then the biggie is actually certifying your list. And that's when you put your stamp of approval on it and say, okay, I have gone through this list. It is as accurate as I can possibly make it be. Now, this is now an automated function in the FDS system where you can kind of pretty much click a button and tell us that your list is good, all right? That has to be done by the end of February for most filers, for non-academic filers, or by the end of September for academic filers. And of course, within 30 days for anybody outside of that range whose information has changed. Okay? Now, the next important date is notifications. You should be notifying your filers that they have to, that they're now subject to this FDS requirement. Explain, as I just said, explain the filing and training requirements, and you should do that by March for non-academic filers, October for academic filers. It also kind of depends on when you're adding them to the system. Usually just give them heads up beforehand. Now, notifications. In April or October, we're going to email all of the FDS filers their official notice to file. All right, that's their official notification. You are subject to this requirement. You need to file. And it's, we give them a 30-day window. We've found that if you send the notice too far in advance, people drop the ball, but 30 days is a good amount of time to meet that. Now, please note, if you don't already know, we use an automatic batch email service. And so email from that will come from jacob@public.govdelivery.com. That is not a manned inbox. We have no way of even retrieving messages that people may answer to that. So, so first of all, know that that is not a way to get your questions answered, but also is a good practice to make sure that your agency's spam filters do not filter that out. We do sometimes get a large number of bounce backs because ITS will tweak some sort of setting in your Outlook, and now all of a sudden all of our emails are coming back. So a quick little note to whoever manages ITS services for your agency can go a long way to making sure that FDS filers get the notices from us that they need. All right. Deadlines. Oh, deadlines. We all love them. So, so the deadline to both file your FDS, apply for an exemption, or apply for an extension are all going to be the same. All right. So May 15th, November 15th, depending on your filing type, just so you're clear. All right, now, I've mentioned it before, but did you know, it is important, it is part of Public Officers Law 73, specifically 73A-CII, that ethics officers are required to update the system with any changes to their filers within 30 days. If it sounds like I'm repeating myself, it's because that's a really important one, and that's the one that it can take a while for agencies to find the processes and the staff to be able to make sure that those updates happen on a timely manner. We've often heard from ethics officers, well, HR doesn't tell me about those salary changes. You know, ethics officers don't always have all of the information they need immediately, but you can throw that statute out there and open up a conversation with human resources and explain why you need this information. So make friends with your HR. That would be my recommendation. Chocolate. Chocolate is a nice way to do that. I don't know. Valentine's Day, I'm thinking chocolate. So just whatever it takes, you know, think about what your processes and procedures are, and if you need to tweak it somehow to make sure that these updates happen in a timely manner, that would be really helpful. And if we can help you with any kind of suggestions, we'll do what we can as well. Best practices for filing notifications. Again, I've mentioned some of this, but we do recommend that you don't just send a mass email to all staff. I know that many of you have access to like an agency all button, and it's easy to just send something, blast out to your entire agency. But that's not really going to be helpful, especially for the staff who are not FDS filers. That's the kind of thing that makes people stop reading your emails if you send things that aren't relevant to them, right? So instead, there's a couple of places within the FDS system that you can create custom distribution lists of all of your active filers. And I'll point those out when I show you the FDS system. So you can very easily download a list of your active filers. It has you can download it into a spreadsheet, you can sort it, and it'll have all of the email addresses, and you can use that to target who you need to. All right? So just keep in mind, you should be the first point of contact for those folks. All right. Now, a couple of special situations. There's a couple of groups of filers that don't act like others. For one, you may have members of a board or a commission, a council or authority, and they don't act like your regular staff. Many of them are unpaid or per diem officers, and some of them are some of them get hired through the governor's appointments office, and they may have filed an FDS with the appointments office. And if so, they can provide us with a copy of it, and that will be good enough. You may also have some filers who file the equivalent of a FDS form with the New York City Conflict of Interest Board. And if they do file with COIB, they can provide us with that COIB form along with some supplements. So if you have questions about how to handle filing requirements for those special populations, give us a call. These filing specialists here are fantastic people, and they will help you out. All right. Now, I did promise you that I was going to talk fast and talk a lot, right? But my voice is back, so isn't that great? All right. Okay, so let's get to some FAQs here. People are often asking, what credentials do I need to add into the system to get somebody connected to it? The FDS system is an application that is nested within the my.ny.gov universe of state applications. And so they need a my.ny.gov user ID in order to get through it. So how you get that depends on who you are. Most state employees, they can use their ny.gov directory services credential, right? That will work just fine. SUNY employees, they will have an ID that begins with SUNY. SUNY is kind of its own little thing. They have their own ID convention, but that will work as well. CUNY employees do not. So CUNY employees who are filers, they have to go in and create a personal my.ny.gov account and then give you what their user ID is, right? Anybody can create a ny.gov account. You give them that credential, plug it in, and that will work as well. Now, for people who are on those authorities, commissions, boards, councils, whatnot, they may or may not have access to that ny.gov account as an employee, in which case they should do what the CUNY people do and create a personal account, and that will get them in. Because that ny.gov credential is the key that will allow them to get access into the FDS. All right, designations. What do those designations mean? So we'll give you a brief overview. Policymaker, and I'm just going to put this disclaimer out here because people are noticing it. In the system, the designation policymaker is listed as 2 words, and I'm a former English teacher, so I am horrified because it is supposed to be a 1 word. It's, all right, I see some nods, right? Those of us who are kind of sticklers for grammar. Policymaker is 1 word, but when the system developers were creating it, they made policymaker 2 words. And so for that purpose, in this presentation, whenever we are referring to the designation in the system, I kept it as 2 words. But whenever I am discussing their role in the agency, I've tried to make it 1 word. So I'm splicing hairs there, but I just wanted to let you know that I feel your pain. If that's one of those things that's going to cause you to grit your teeth, I'm with you. All right? So there's that. Policymaker. As I explained, policymakers are, it's a designation that is given by the agency, and that makes them subject to FDS rules without an exemption. The threshold over designation, that is for filers who have met that salary threshold. Salary grade 24. Ethics denied. Ethics denied is when somebody has applied for an exemption, but JCOPE has determined that for whatever reason, it's not appropriate for them to have an exemption. So ethics denied gets put in there as their designation as a way to record that an exemption was requested and denied. And on the flip side of that is agency objections, where we have granted an exemption, but the agency, for whatever reason, disagrees with us. So that is a designation that kind of captures all of that. A few more titles or designations. Former threshold and over. You may be using this one quite a bit as you contemplate the change in salary schedule. You may, in fact, have filers who are current threshold filers, but when that threshold goes up in April, they're now going to fall below that salary threshold. So when you go in to update your filers, you're just going to change them from a threshold over filer to a former threshold and over filer. Easy peasy, and that makes them inactive, and we stop going after them, and they are free to go. They don't have to file anymore. Similar is former policymaker. If you have somebody who was a policymaker, but they've changed titles, roles, whatever, they're not a policymaker anymore, you change them to former policymaker, and that makes them inactive, and they're off the hook. Academic filer, as I've already mentioned, those are SUNY CUNY professors, and that designation gives them that whole different set of filing deadlines. And former academic filer, that should be pretty straightforward. They were an academic filer, but now they're below the threshold, so they're former. There you go. Those are the biggies, right? All right, but these designations can really get people twisted up. So this question was, we have people with the designation of ethics denied, all right? So they had asked for an exemption, it was denied, that's their designation. But we have a new employee who's coming in, and he's going to be joining a position that has one of those titles. So do we put ethics denied for that person, or do we give them their threshold or policy? Because this is a new person, right? They haven't asked for the exemption yet. But if they're in the same title as other people who have that designation, then yes, you would give them the ethics denied designation. As long as they're not a policymaker, you can give that give them that designation. Now, there's plenty of titles that have been denied. We are going to be looking at those title exemptions. But for now, if you do have any questions about what designation a filer should have, give us a quick call. It's usually a question that we can answer for you pretty straightforward, and it's better to have your question answered and have the designation right than to take a guess and have it screw up. Because a lot of the communications we do with a filer are based on what their designation is in the system, so that one's a pretty important one to get right. All right, so how should we handle filers who were above the old filing threshold but are now below the filing threshold? And this is what I just mentioned. So the new filing threshold as of April 1st will be 99,394. So if you have threshold over filers who fall below that threshold, you're going to change them. You're going to change their designation to a former threshold filer. All right. Now, if you're not sure whether or not their salary is going to be there, you can hold off until you know for sure. You can hold off until you know for sure, but if you know that somebody is going to be below that, you can cease any of those efforts to nag them, right? If you know that they're not going to be a filer. How do we delete records of people who have left? We don't want them on our list anymore. Send them away. So just know, first of all, you can't delete filers from the system. Records retention policies, we have to keep all records for at least 7 years, right? So instead, the way they drop off of your active filer list is to change their status so they become inactive, right? That's how they disappear. So we give you some instructions on how to do that. I'll show you a little bit later, but whenever you see a pencil icon, that allows you to edit information. So you can edit, you have to edit their job status to show that they have left service. So I'll show you that when we get to the kind of system functions. I've got some screenshots that'll make it easier than all of those words. All the words are there for if you download this presentation later. How do I indicate if one of my filers goes on leave? This is an important one, and this is one of those updates that sometimes gets overlooked. And this is definitely one where you need to have good relationships with your HR folks, because you may not know somebody's going out on leave, right? But they should be notifying you of that. So if they go out on leave, there is a place in the FDS system where you indicate they're going on leave and what the date of the leave commencing is. This allows us to stop sending notices to the filer because they're not in active status, right? It also suspends the training activities while they're on leave, and it should adjust their due dates once they come back from leave, as long as once they come back from leave, you have to update them again to say that they're back, all right? So it's one more filer maintenance step, but it's a pretty important one. It does sometimes get overlooked, and that can screw up the filer's rights to have extensions of time and things like that. If they were, truly not in active service, you should tell the system that so that we can not bug them. How about that? Now, one of the things that I didn't mention, it was on the previous slide, is that a filer can request an exemption for himself, but also a collective bargaining unit can request an exemption for a large group of people, their members. I don't know if this happens very often, does it? Not really, but it's something that can happen. So how does it work? It works the same regardless of who is requesting it, though, actually. Either an individual, an agency, or a union can request, can submit that exemption request. So there's no special hat trick there for a union that requests an exemption. So, but generally speaking, if a union is going to be requesting that, they would have to download the paper form because they wouldn't have a login to be able to request it through the FDS system. Just keep in mind, policymakers can't request exemptions, so this is for threshold filers only. All right. Now, how are those title exemptions determined? That's a big loaded question. And the follow-up is consideration given to the impact that they may have on others with the same title or salary. Those are great questions, and the best short answer is it's complicated. Determining exemptions is a process, and it's one that we take seriously, and it takes a while. There's a lot of different factors to examine. But generally speaking, we won't grant an exemption if the person's job involves contracts, leases, franchises, something similar. If their job involves the exchange of property or goods or grants or money or loans, those kinds of things will not get an exemption. Or if the person in that title has anything to do with the adoption or repeal or formulation or the enforcement of rules or regulations, all right? Those are the kinds of things that we would be looking at within the job titles to know whether or not somebody could qualify for an exemption. So when we ask you for additional information about a job title, when we ask you for additional information about the duties of that job title, it's because somebody is getting a headache trying to figure out whether or not this person, whether it weighs against the public interest. So we do take that process seriously, but if you have any questions about that, like I said, give us a call. Now, how are you notified if you have an exemption request determination? Well, once we've reviewed and processed it and a determination is made, that filer's profile is updated, and it will automatically send an email to the filer letting them know whether or not that exemption has been granted or denied. And a copy of that determination notice is sent to the agency's ethics officer. So you will get notified of that determination. We don't leave you in the dark on that. Now, is notification made when an employee's status goes from exempt to non-exempt? Who is notified? First of all, when that status changes, it happens immediately. So you can literally just see it for yourself right there on the profile. They're going to appear on your active list once they're removed from exempt status. You are the one who should notify the filer that due to a change that they are now required to file. I mean, we're going to send them the filer notice at the time, but if there's something that has changed for a filer, you're often on the front ends to be able to tell them. The system doesn't send out automatic notifications for every event that might affect a filer, and that's one of the ones that it does not send out an automatic notice for. All right, well, what happens if I have some staff members who are dragging their feet and I cannot convince them that they really need to take this seriously? Well, what happens if they don't file on time? The universe comes to a halt. Well, not right away. First of all, we're going to reach out to those filers kind of informally first. We're going to send them a notice, a little, hey, are you forgetting something? And that's a 15-day letter. It gives them 15 days to go, oh, that thing I forgot to do? Yeah. Now, if after 15 days, if they still are non-compliant with our request, that's when we issue a notice of delinquency. The notice of delinquency is sent to the filer, and it's also sent to the agency. That first 15-day letter, that's just between us and the filer. We're just going to try to, edge them along. But if it gets to the notice of delinquency, we will definitely notify you. The other thing that you can use, I guess, to try to encourage filers to file you don't want them to get to a notice of delinquency stage because those notices of delinquency are posted on our website, and Google is forever. So if anybody wants to Google their name, you don't want to see your name in a Google search because they are non-compliant with a state ethics agency. That just looks bad, right? You could also let them know that they have civil penalties of up to $40,000 for not filing an FDS. But just to make it worse, even if they get fined the maximum amount, there's also possibilities of some criminal liability for not completing these. And even if we threw the book at them, it still doesn't remove the obligation to file. It still has to file. So we're here to help them with that. Though honestly, we have this wonderful group of folks here. If your filer is stuck on a question, maybe they're just like stuck on a process, we're here to help them. We'll talk them through whatever it takes to get them to that point, right? This is what the obligation is, but we're here to help. We're here to help you, and we're here to help them get that done.
Well, hopefully. We're going to do a little...
All right. Sometimes the filer will come to you asking, how do I answer question fill in the blank? And it often is about how do I document my assets, right? Well, and that's understandable because the largest part of the form is all asking people to talk about their financial obligations, right? So regardless of the question, what I would generally say, could WebEx please confirm that your microphones are on mute? We got somebody who may have just come in. Thank you. So most of the questions relate to financial disclosure. That's the name of the form, literally. So if they have specific questions, if you happen to know the answer, that's great. But if that's territory you'd rather not wade in, give them our FDS help desk number, and we would be happy to help them answer any questions. All right. So, that's the first third of it. Questions, sir?
You said that agencies are notified of a determination as to whether an exemption has been granted. Do you notify the agency whether an application has been made?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we notify my ventriloquism act here.
As soon as the request is received, I send out an email. I'm Melinda, by the way. I send out an email giving you, I believe it's 7 business days to respond if you're objecting to the exemption request. You will get notified. And if the individual hasn't provided you with a copy of it already, I can provide you a copy with the request as well.
Thank you. One more question, really quick one, I
Yes.
think. You say the FDS is a looking back document. When somebody retires shortly before, around, I don't know, but before the filing date, do they file for the year prior while they're still working, even though they're retired?
I'm also going to field that one too, Melinda.
No. If a filer leaves prior to their filing deadline, they are not required to file. If they leave after if they leave on the filing deadline or after, they still must file a statement, and we will pursue them for it.
Thank you.
All right. So let me just repeat that for the microphone, just because I know sometimes it can be hard to hear. Yes, if somebody is going to leave, if somebody leaves service before the filing deadline, they don't have to file. But if they leave the day of the filing deadline or after, then yes, they still do have to file. All right, I saw a question, yes.
And I don't know if the system, I did notice the system has had some updates and things work a lot better, so thank you, whoever did that. But, so I think this is last year, and I didn't know it did this, and so now I know, I'll look for it this year. But April 1st is the salary threshold cutoff, and so I have people entered in there, but MCs almost every year always get their salary delayed. So either the system or Jacob went in and changed them to me to no longer threshold, whatever that choice is there, between the April 1st and May, and I didn't know it had changed because I had entered them, they were at the threshold before April 1st, April 1st came, MCs didn't get it till like June, and so in that period of time, they had gotten changed to being under threshold. I didn't know that the system or Jacob did it, and I didn't go back and change them when MCs got their retro back to April. So, like, is that just something we have to watch for, or?
Yes, the way the system is set up each year, the filing deadline is updated in the SDS system. This way, if you go in to add somebody and you put them at the filing rate or just below it, it'll pop up red, you can't do this. So the system, once it automatically updates, it's saying, okay, these people are no longer required to file it because now they're below the threshold. So it's going to make them inactive because technically they haven't met the requirement. And that's why it's very, very important that agencies update on a regular basis. You know, there's many times agencies wait until this filing certification now to do their updates, and we find out people we've been pursuing left 8 months ago and they were never required to file. So it's very important to keep those updates going right along.
So say MCs get their raises in June back to April, and so now that puts them back over the threshold. They're going to have the 30 days from then. They're not going to get paid because they weren't timely for May, right?
Correct.
Okay.
When you go in to update them, if they don't get the raise until June, they'll remain inactive until that point, and when they get the raises go through, and that's when you go in to update them. As soon as you click that update button, the system will say, okay, this person's required to file. I'm going to send notice down. I'm going to set a 30-day deadline from today to file.
And, well, one of the things, though, I'd like to say is that we are still working very closely with the system developers. And as you pointed out, they are still working behind the scenes to make changes and improvements. And we all know there's still room to grow. we definitely are aware of that. But one of the goals that we have when we're working with the developers is to find ways to automate things that will make the information in the system more accurate and also to relieve some of the burdens of maintenance on you. We can't anticipate all situations. And as an MC employee, I completely understand your frustrations about you're going to have groups of people or populations that fall between the cracks of what normally should happen. So we create the system rules around what are the usual scenarios. And unfortunately, with any system like this, we cannot build for every possible scenario. So they are going to be treated as reactivated filers or new filers, and they're going to have, even though they were, yep, we understand that their salary was this and now it's that. But that's the reason for just being patient with it a little bit. Yes.
Okay, another one. And is military leave choice the leave of absence?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's various statuses, medical leave, sabbatical, just a regular leave of absence. There's a bunch of choices there to use.
That's my choice, the leave of absence
Yeah.
for military. And I'm sorry, my last question is, so when you deny someone putting in, you said we're going to get notification that you denied it. Do you go in and change it now to a filer, or do then we have to do that based on the notification that you denied their exemption?
What'll happen is once the exemption is denied, the system will send the notification out to both you and the filer, and it'll reset their filing due date. The ethics denied designation, I think is what you're getting to, is only for title requests. It's not, has anything to do with an individual request. Ethics denied is where the agency or the union has requested a title exemption for everybody in a specific title, and the commission has said, no, we're not granting it. So these are non-policy making people that a group has been denied exemption, and we indicate that with ethics denied. That way we know anybody in that title is not eligible for an exemption.
Okay, thank you.
Anything in the text chat for that? All right, fantastic. All right, and keep in mind though, we're always available by phone and email too for additional questions if we don't get to them here. All right, let me take you through a speedy overview of ethics training. This is where I usually live here at the agency. So let's give you what you need to know. First of all, the training requirement is attached to the filing requirement. All right, so if anything changes for a filer's status that they're no longer required to file, they become inactive or exempt, then the training requirements go away as well. So one bone is connected to the other. And the training requirement is found in Executive Law 94. That's the same law that says that the trainings have to be live, in-person, instructor-led, and can't be online. So here's the three classes and the acronyms we use. The online ethics orientation, the OEO, the orientation is designed as a placeholder course. The only course we're allowed to have online is currently hosted in SLMS. Not all agencies have access to SLMS, and that is a limitation. But it's designed just to be a placeholder because of the primary training obligation for an FDS filer is the comprehensive ethics training course, all right? The CETC, the famous CETC or CETIC as some people call it. Now, the way executive law is written, a filer has up to 2 years to take that. And I think that's in recognition of the fact that this is a live training class requirement, and it can be hard to get a seat in the class. You as ethics officers are probably not holding this class like every week, but if you've got somebody who does not have access to SLMS, then the solution is to try to get them into a CETC class as soon as is practical, all right? So the other thing to know is because the CETC is the legal training requirement, and then they are subject to refresher training every 3 years, the FDS system tracks the first-time completion of the CETC separately from all subsequent refresher training. So if you see within the FDS system CETC, what it means is the first time the filer took that course. All subsequent refresher training is called the ethics seminar / refresher, even if they keep retaking the CETC, all right? And it's just important to know because it depends on where you're going to be entering it. So only the first time gets stored as CETC. We want to record that the filer has met that first initial obligation, and everything else gets recorded as refresher training. We do have a separate class called the ethics seminar. It's a little bit shorter, and it's way more fun. We do make all of those training materials available online now, so if you want to add the seminar course, that is something that you can do. You're not required to because the CETC satisfies both brand new first-time filers as well as those who need refresher training. So those are the 3 classes. Now, we are required to submit annual training statistics to the governor and the legislature, and we base those annual reporting statistics based on the information that you provide to us, and you do that by entering their training completion dates in the FDS system. It used to be that we asked agencies to, once a year, submit these monstrously horrible spreadsheets. Some of you may recall that, that detailed the training dates for all of your filers. We've done away with that. Now that we have training completion dates stored in the FDS system, as long as you are updating your filers' training records on an ongoing basis, you don't have to submit an annual report to us anymore. But if you are updating irregularly, make sure that at least by the end of January, you've made all of your updates because that's when we're pulling those figures for our annual report. So what do you need to do to manage this process? Well, a couple of things. As we've already said, notify your filers of this training obligation because the moment you add a filer to the FDS system, the very first thing that happens is that the FDS system sends an email to the filer saying, hey, new filer, did you know you have ethics training to do? And if you haven't notified them in advance of that, that email is going to come out of nowhere, and it's going to surprise and alarm them, perhaps. All right, so let them know ahead of time. Yes? The question was, how soon does that notice get sent? Immediately. Like immediately. As soon as you add the filer, that notice gets sent out to them, which is why I was urging you to, when you are onboarding somebody, do those notifications in advance before you even get to adding them into the system, because once you've added them to the system, then that process already starts. Sir?
In my agency, I'm the assistant director of HR in my agency, and we put it in the appointment letter. So if the ethics officers want to work with HR, maybe revise the appointment letter to put that stuff in there. They know immediately when they get their appointment, and that's the build-up. Great tip.
We just had somebody here in the crowd say that he puts that information right in the new employee's appointment letter, and I think that's a great strategy. I wish more people would do that, just as it's kind of a procedural process that covers all of those bases. Right. So great suggestion. So what else do you have to do? Offer the training. I am one trainer, and we are one very small agency. There are 389 agencies, and there are over 30,000 filers, and I promise you, as much as I love training, and I do, can you tell? I cannot possibly train them all. So we do expect that agency ethics officers are going to be offering these training courses on an ongoing basis as needed. Now, you can totally delegate that, though. You don't have to do it yourself. Different agencies have different resources available, and one of the things that we provide is very clear, detailed trainer notes for all of that. So the person who's training this material does not need to be an expert in ethics. They don't need to be an attorney. They just need to be willing to stand there with a slide advancer and be a live body to help facilitate the material. That's pretty much it. And if you want to delegate this to somebody and they're hyperventilating a little bit about this task, have them give me a call. I'm more than happy to talk to a new person who's training this for the first time, help soothe any fears, answer any questions about how to train the material. All right, it's an important task, and we want to be able to help you accomplish that. Another required action is to monitor the training status of your filers. There are reports and things within the FDS system that will allow you to do that. I'll show you where to find that kind of information. And the final step is to regularly update training histories as needed. We really depend on you for updated information. When filers call me and ask me when they're due, I go into the SDS system and I only know what you tell me. And so it's important that you keep that information updated. All right, so what are some of the things that people ask about ethics training? Once somebody has completed training, how do I determine which course that they completed? The CETC or the ethics seminar? I think people are starting to figure this out, and I've already mentioned this. The CETC is just that first time completion date, and all future dates are going to be refresher dates, okay? And I'll show you when we look at some of the screenshots. When you're entering those training completion dates, there'll be a drop-down box that asks you which course did they complete. Did they retake the CETC or did they take the seminar? And that's how you indicate which course they took. All right. Sometimes people are asking, what is tested out? I'm looking at a filer's profile. I see they were tested out of the OEO, that orientation class. Because the CETC is the primary training obligation, if they take the CETC first and you enter a completion date, it will automatically test out the OEO. So it just basically means that they have met that OEO requirement by completing the CETC, and that's an automated system function. Just as a little heads up, when we were building this function into the system, we noticed that a lot of people had completed the CETC, but it was still showing that the OEO was due, and we asked the system developers to apply a patch and automatically test out anybody who had already completed the CETC. So if you see February 23rd, 2017, and somebody says, I didn't take the OEO then, that's what that is. That was just a patch to correct people's records. All right, there's one section of the FDS system called Filer Training Data Entry, and that is where all information related to ethics training lives, including lists of all of your filers. And sometimes people say, hey, I went onto those lists and some of my filers aren't there. Why? What's going on? The first thing is check the profile of the filer, because sometimes you'll be able to figure it out yourself. If they're either inactive or exempt, if a status has changed, they're not going to show up on your active list. Sometimes sometimes a filer has two agencies. They have a primary agency and a secondary agency. Now, if that is the case, if you are the secondary agency, they'll still appear on your active filer list, but they will not appear on the training list because only the primary agency is tasked with updating training history. So it might just be that they have a primary agency other than yours. Or, number three, gotta throw this one in the mix, it could just be that there is some sort of error on your filer's profile that is keeping them from that list. There's a number of reasons why that could happen. Many of them are related to prior bugs or fixes in the system. There's still data that we're working on cleaning up. Filers' records are as complete as we can make them, and yet there are some known issues that I'll tell you about them. So if it's not one or two, give us a call, give me a call. I'll help troubleshoot it, and I'll try to figure out why they're not appearing on your screens. We'll fix it when we can. All right, can filers request a training extension? Yes, they can, but you can't do it for them, even though sometimes they want you to do it for them. there is a button on the filer's dashboard that allows them to, with a click, request a training extension. Again, they also have to apply, give a brief explanation, undue hardship for justifiable cause. Right? We examine it on a case-by-case basis, but that button only appears on the filer's profile, so ethics officers don't have access to that. So if you have a filer who wants a training extension, you have to direct them to go into their profile and request it that way. Megan.
Hey, I'm Megan. For those of you who do not know me, I'm the Deputy Director of Education here, and I am the keeper of the extension request. So I wanted to just make a point about this. If any of your filers say to you, oh, can I get an extension, and then say, oh, sure, go into the system, make sure that they are really looking at the date, because what I would say 85% of filers are doing are asking for an extension, and it's for next year. They look at
the reminder notice.
Yeah, they look at it. It's like 1/24, but it's for next year. Okay, so just say, make sure you really take a look, and they usually just look at those first, the month and the date. So just a little.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I'll mention it now. I'm not sure if I mention it later. Some of the automatic notices that we send out for training, we used to, last year, we sent out a 1 year and 6 month advance reminder notice, right? Because if you have to get retrained every 3 years, that would fall off of anybody's radar, right? So we figured, well, let's give them a 1 year notice, and then we'll give them another one in 6 months, because we recognize it can take them a long time to get into a live class. But we noticed that 1 year notice was wreaking havoc. People were thinking, oh, I just got this notice that I'm due today? How could that be possible? It's not. But people don't read attentively. I'll be generous. So what we did was we changed it. It's not a 1 year notice now. We're doing it 9 months and 6 months prior, just to make the dates off enough that hopefully people will read them. So just as a heads up, if you haven't heard from any filers, panic about that. For some reason, they panic about a reminder notice. It's just a courtesy. It's like, hey, this is your year. It's the 3rd year. You need training, and that's what that is. All right. So what happens to a filer's training history if they were on leave, inactive, or exempt, and then come back? So on leave, inactive, exempt, it depends on how long they were gone. If they were gone for less than a year, then the due date for their next training is just going to be extended by the amount of time that they were gone. All right? Easy peasy. Now, if they're gone for more than a year, then what happens is that their former training history gets archived and new classes get added as though they were a new filer. And the thinking is, if you're gone for more than a year, then it's possible that you may have missed any kind of memos or updates, if there have been any changes to ethics policies or laws. If you're gone for more than a year, you probably missed out on that. And so we're going to treat you like a new filer. But what that really means is it extends their CETC deadline for 2 years. It really just gives them more time to complete retraining, right? Now, we're working on getting the system to do this automatically, and it is working sometimes. So why do some filers have training due dates that are greater than 3 years? Some of you may have noticed this. You'll look at your list of filers, and you'll see some people aren't due until 2026. What's up with that? All right, so we finally tracked this down. For several months in this past year, there was a glitch that when a filer was reactivated, the system was automatically extending their due date regardless of how much time they were gone. So if somebody had left state service and was gone for 6 years, and then they came back, but they had been a filer, now they have a 6-year extended deadline. So that's why that was happening. It took us a long time, though, to really track down what was going on there. We're still working on identifying those records and fixing the dates when we find them, but this is something that you can fix yourself. If you see somebody with an obviously wrong wacko due date, you can use the training override to change those due dates. We're working on more systematic fixes to that data, but that could take a while. So generally speaking, though, if you have issues with training dates, if you feel pretty confident and you know what you're doing and you have my permission to go ahead and fix those dates. If you are at all hesitant about that, give me a call, me personally, call Kate. I'll troubleshoot it. I spent a whole lot of time doing that. I'll troubleshoot the issue, and I will try to help get those records corrected, all right? I was working with the developers this week trying to address these issues and make sure I had answers for you by today. I think I've already addressed this. Do you have to do an annual report anymore? No, just keep doing your annual updates and all will be well. All right, so before I go on and give you an orientation, questions about training?
Just one really quick one, if I might.
Sure.
Maybe I misunderstood you or didn't hear you correctly. You want all the training updates by the end of January?
The question is, just to be clear, you want all the training updates to be done by the end of January? Yes. With a caveat, we would prefer that you update records on an ongoing basis. But we do recognize that there are some agencies with just a handful of filers and maybe they're only doing those updates kind of on an irregular basis. If for whatever reason you have not been diligent about updating those records, at the very least by the end of January, we need to have those records updated. But our preference is just update them as you go along because, like I said, we really do depend on accurate information from you. We only know what you tell us, and so we do depend on you letting us know.
And I just have one follow-up because maybe other people are guilty of this. What happens if you neglected to do it by the end of January and you do it tomorrow?
Oh,
I'm not talking about myself.
Right. For Brad, yeah, what happens if we miss that January 30th the deadline? Nothing except the report that we build off of the data that you provide to us will be less accurate. Your agency may appear as though you have a large number of filers who are delinquent on their training. We report that kind of thing. We report how many agencies have filers with 100% compliance and agencies that are struggling with compliance and things like that. So that's where it would have an impact is the annual report that we send up to the governor. But we're not going to...
My friend has done all the training, but perhaps hasn't put that in by the end.
Right. We do, if you have questions about, or if you need help developing some strategies for getting those system updates done, we'll do what we can to help. Questions?
I know you mentioned last year when we did this, when we're updating the records and there's the drop down for CETC or seminar, you said that if they've already done the CETC, always use the seminar option.
Nope.
That's still the case.
Well,
You said there was a
okay.
glitch the last time.
Yeah. Well, last year, we've had a whole year of making the system better. Woo-hoo! So when you have a brand new filer, they have to take the CETC. And you won't have really a choice on where to plug that data in. The CETC will be the open class, and you enter it there. The question is, then 3 years later, when they're taking refresher training, they can retake the CETC, but where do you record it? You'll be recording it on the refresher training screen, and that's where you'll see a drop down, and it'll say, okay, but which class did they really take for this? And that's where you can say they took the CETC again. So I'll show you that because we've got some screenshots, I think, that will put those out.
Thank you.
All right, so the FDS system, what does it look like? It looks like a lot of darkness. All right, well, I mean, it's in a dark color scheme, that's all I'm saying. Oh, good. I made my helper laugh. All right, so known FDS system issues. Sometimes you get an error 123 message, all right? This is the most common error message. It's a known thing. It's not necessarily a problem. When you're updating the system, if you missed a critical piece of information, you tried to update without providing it, it's going to throw that error message. So the recommended strategy is make sure that you've completed everything, try to do the update again, and if it still throws the error message, that's when you give us a call, because maybe there is something else going on. But usually it's just like somebody overlooked something when they hit submit. So double check things, try again. If not, give us a call. The other thing is some compatibility issues. Now, it says that the FDS system is optimized for Internet Explorer and Firefox. I use Chrome all the time for the FDS system, and I don't have any problem with it. But some people have connection issues using different browsers. It's not across the board and it's not for everybody, but if somebody is having trouble getting into the FDS system and they're using Chrome or another third-party browser, ask them to at least try logging in using Internet Explorer, because sometimes that is the thing that will solve the problem. And when somebody is trying to file their FDS, they're already a little anxious, and when they're starting to have problems like this, giving them like an easy solution to try on their own sometimes can be very empowering. So sometimes as simple as switching a browser can help. All right, so when you first log in as the ethics officer or as the agency contact, the first thing you're going to see is the attestation box that says, please be advised that any changes that you make, certify of formal amendment to your agency's filer list. That is because of that statutory legal requirement that you must update us with information within 30 days. But when we created the system that allows you to continually be updating information, it used to be you had to file these paper amendment forms, and it was bulky. So we solved that problem by just giving you a little attestation that you're like, yep, I know that I am officially updating my records. Bink, that's it. So you say, okay, it gets you into the system. All right, now we're going to look through some of the menus. So one of the first things is either JCOPE or dashboard will always bring you back to your FDS officer dashboard. The next menu item is the search item. And this is where you can search for individual filers in your agency, allows you to go straight to your filer's profile page where you can see all sorts of useful things. There's a regular search just by name, but you also have an advanced search. So it gives you flexibility about how to find people, especially if you're an agency that has a lot of filers. Now, it is recommended that you use this function before you're adding a filer, just check to make sure that they're maybe don't already have a profile in the system, maybe they're just inactive, because what we're trying to avoid is creating duplicate profiles to the same person. We want to keep all of their filing history and their training records together, so we don't want duplicate profiles. So if you check to make sure they're not an inactive filer first before you add them, that can solve a lot of problems right there. Now, if you search, it brings you to the filer's profile page. And this is where you're going to be adding or updating your filer. And I have a red arrow pointing to the little pencil that's right next to the word filer. And you click that pencil, and that allows you to edit the fields in that left-hand box, right? We have the filer box on the left side and the agency box on the right side. And each box has a little bit different information, and each box has a pencil that allows you to then go in and edit the fields that are in there. Pretty straightforward, unless you don't know where to find that pencil. So that's why I'm pointing it out. That's how to do it. So on the right-hand side, I have an arrow pointing to that little pencil. Those icons are really tiny, and I've got old eyes. So I think it's helpful to know where to find things. All right, now the agency box, though, that's where you're going to be updating the salary. That's where you'll find the job status. That's where you put them out on leave, or if they leave your agency entirely as well. Salary and the designation field, those policymaker, threshold over, all of those designations. So all of those critical agency functions are over on the right-hand side. So when you're adding a new filer, those are the two boxes that you really want to make sure that you've got the information that you need in order to get them added. Remember, you're going to notify them before you do that, because as soon as you hit add filer, it's going to send those emails off to them. All right, now moving down from the filers page, so you have the two boxes on the top, and as you scroll down the page, the next section is personal info history. And what that does is it's just a running list of all of the updates that have been made to a filer's profile. All right, so if they changed address, if their salary changed, you'll be able to see a record of the changes that were made to the profile. That's pretty straightforward. It can help us with troubleshooting updates that were made. Below that is the activity log. Activity log has a lot of information, especially for filers who've been around for a long time. But it's a really important resource for you and for us for being able to figure out what's going on with a particular filer. So one thing, I have a big red arrow pointing to a row of buttons right at the top of the activity log. Those are filters. They allow you to filter the activities that you're seeing. And I use the education filter all the time because I don't necessarily need to see all of the filer's filing history. I'm just looking for the training stuff. So you click the education button, it filters so you're only seeing that. Now, the reason I mentioned that particular filter is because the activity log is also one of two locations where you can enter a filer's training completion date. So if you filter by education, any open due date is going to have a little pencil icon next to it. You click that pencil icon, it allows you to enter a training completion date right there. Anytime you enter a training completion date, it automatically creates the next class due with a new due date based on the completion date you just entered. All right, so the activity log is one place that you can do that. Now, below the activity log, there is a comment section. Comments are just pieces of information. If something is strange or unusual is going on, or if you had to make an update for somebody and you needed to make a comment about that, you can make a comment there, and that comment lives on the activity log. What that comment does not do is get sent to the FDS unit. So do not use the comment section as a way to notify us about some sort of unusual circumstance of your filer. If there is something that we need to know about, please let us know directly. But the comments, they're more like notes to self, right? I updated somebody's training due date, and I made a note in there about why I changed what I changed, so the ethics officer could see that I wasn't just messing around. Okay, so that's what the comment function is for. All right, the training override tool, right along that series of filter buttons, there's a training override. This gives you great power. Use it wisely. But the training override allows you to fix things. It is not used for entering completion dates. It's not used for routine maintenance of a filer's training history. But, we all make typos, we all make mistakes, and certainly the system is still every once in a while throwing us a curveball. So the override is there to give you control to fix errors that you may see in a filer's training history. So it gives you a pop-up bubble that will show you what their current training schedule is. You can use the little pencil icons to modify due dates, modify completion dates. You can also adjust CLE credit, et cetera. There's an update button that you have to click in order for it to accept those changes. And one other thing to note is that you may need to refresh your screen before you see those changes reflected in the activity log, all right? But it is a very important tool. The other button I want to draw your attention to within there is the Send Schedule button. If you have updated, like let's say you made a typo when you entered their completion date, and you said that they completed the training in 1919 instead of 2019. Whoopsies! Every time you enter a training completion date, it automatically sends an email to the filer saying, hey filer, we see you completed this training on this date, and your next training due is this. But if you put in a bad due date, they got a notice now. They just got notified that they completed a training back in the previous century. When you go into the override to fix that typo, their record has changed, but they won't be notified. The Send Schedule button allows you to immediately send them an updated training schedule. So if you do need to fix something that you boo-booed, you can use the Send Schedule just to kind of like roll that other email back and give them an updated form. All right, so that's a very useful one-click help for you. All right, Filer's Dashboard. The Filer's Dashboard looks different than the FDS Officer's Dashboard. Looks very different. For one thing, in the upper right-hand corner, filers have a help button. And when they click on that help button, it gives them three options to send an immediate email to either their ethics officers, to the FDS unit, or to the education unit, depending on what they need help with. All right, so that can be helpful to know that it exists, because if you're the person who is fielding a lot of questions from filers, you can tell them to log in and reach out to you directly by clicking that help button. Right? Now, the other thing that Filer's Dashboard has is you can see in the lower left-hand corner, that is the Training Extension Request button that appears on a Filer's Dashboard. It doesn't appear for the ethics officers, so you may never know it exists unless you log in as a filer, but there's that. Below that is filing information and ethics officers information. So They will always know who their ethics officer is, and the filing section is where they can request extensions and exemptions and things like that. So they have a very different view from you. But this is not a training for them, so let's get back to you. All right, so we're going back to the menu items now. The first one we looked at was search to find your filers. The next menu item is the add, and you can do two things. You can either add a filer or you can add a new agency contact, and that's what those are. So if you need to add new filers because you've got new people in, boom, that's where you go. If you are an ethics officer and you want to delegate some of these administrative maintenance tasks to staff in your agency, then you can do that by using this add officer and delegating staff to be an agency contact. So we have many agency contacts here today. So ethics officers can create agency contacts. Agency contacts cannot create other agency contacts. That's the way that works. All right, so adding a filer. When you use that add filer button, the system is going to look for possible matches. Again, like I said, we really want to try to avoid duplicate profiles. So you're going to add the filer, you're going to enter in all of the filers, personal information and their agency information. When you click add filer, the system is then going to search to see whether or not maybe the profile already exists. And if it does, it's going to give you a list of possible matches. And it searches a number of different data fields, emails and names, things like that. Now, if none of the people on that list match who you just added, then you go ahead and create a new filer. But if somebody on that list is a match, you click the little icon next to it, and that takes the changes that the information you just entered, and it merges it with their former profile, and that maintains the continuity of their records. If you have any questions about that process, or if you realize that you may have accidentally created a duplicate record, no harm, it's okay, but contact the SDS help desk. They can help merge those records back. But we do want to identify that because otherwise they're going to have their records are going to be disjointed. So we want to make sure that we address that. All right. So for the add officer, sometimes people wonder, what's the difference between them? Very little. Both roles as FDS officers, both roles have full access to all the information about your filers. You have full view access and full edit access. Agencies can have multiple ethics officers and multiple agency contacts, all as well. JCOPE, the FDS unit, is who creates a new ethics officer in the system. So if you have a change in ethics officer and you need to have somebody new added to the system, let us know. We'll get the information. We'll get them their access to it. But ethics officers can create new agency contacts, right? So once you're an ethics officer in the system, you can create as many agency contacts as you want, but agency contacts can't create themselves. But if you need to remove somebody from the system, you'll have to reach out to the FDS unit. We delete ethics officers and agency contacts. So when you have those kind of personnel changes, just let us know. We'll take care of it right away. It's no big deal. Okay? All right, the next menu item is the certification menu. There's a couple of things here. The first item on that certification menu is the FDS filer certification. This is that big annual obligation to certify to us that your filing list is accurate and updated. When you are ready to certify that to us, that first item there in the certification menu is where you go to do that. So you'll see a list of all of your filers and all of their information. You have to select whether you're looking at academic or non-academic filers. But when you're ready, in the lower left-hand corner is the button that you click to certify the filer list for your agency. Easy. The hard part, of course, is reviewing all of that information and making all the updates, but the certification is just a click of a button. Now, the second area, the second menu item is the filer training data entry, FTDE screens. Now, it looks like just a single menu item, but what it really is a nested series of screens. This is where all of the training information really lives for your agency. There's a lot of information here that is very useful to you. It's also where you can do batch training updates. If you did a training class and you had 30 filers who all completed the same class in the same day, you can go into these screens and click all of the people, enter one training date, and update them all at once. So it's designed to save you time for processing that. If you have just a single filer who, you know, came to get trained with us or something like that, it's usually easier to just go straight to the filer's profile and update their training there. But these screens allow you to enter for a single person, but also allows you to enter for a whole group. These screens also allow you to download the screens into spreadsheets. You can print the screen, but you can also download them. And once you have the data downloaded, you can manipulate it in whichever ways that you like. So actually, let me back up for a second. When you go to the filer training data entry, it's going to default to the all view. There's a number of radio buttons, all OEO, CETC, Ethics Seminar, and upcoming. It defaults to the all view. You can't make any updates to training records on this view. And I will confess that this view can be very confusing. I don't actually find this view to be very useful for me. But that's right. One of the things you can do on the screen is all of the names of the filers' names are hyperlinked to bring you directly to their profile page. So if you are using this all view to just get a big snapshot, you can use that to just instantly go to their filer's profile and look at what's going on there or make updates from there. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So we give so when we have we're looking like, oh, this is putting them in and the rest of the professor, I'm putting them in a seminar. So now you're saying,
I see your point, and I'm glad you mentioned that, especially if I misspoke in any way. All right, so let me rephrase the question. It was the CETC has to be recorded separately from seminar refresher. So if so let me backtrack. If you trained 30 people, one thing you would need to know is how many of those people were taking the CETC for the first time and how many people were taking it for refresher, because those people would have to be entered in one place and refresher people would have to be entered in another. I was probably being too shortcutty there. It still allows you to batch update, but you do need to separate out the people who are taking the CETC for the first time and those who are taking it as refresher, because yes, these are the screens, the different screens, you're going to be recording them differently. So
that was correct to do it that way.
Yes, you do need to separate them out. That is absolutely the correct way to do it. So you're awesome, and thank you for that opportunity to clarify things. All right, let me just take a quick bop through the various screens that you see. The first is the online ethics orientation. So usually you're not going to be batch updating this because you're not going to be doing the orientation as a group, because that's kind of a self-directed activity. But you can use the screen to update individuals. You click the check mark next to their name. At the bottom of the screen, you enter the completion date. You hit enter. It's done. Easy peasy. Right? Now, you go to the next screen over. You click the radio button for the Comprehensive Ethics Training course. Again, this screen is only for those first-time completions of the CETC. And you'll check off the names of anybody who completed it, enter the completion date. Now, there's a second option. It wants to know whether or not your filers received CLE credit for attending. That's for attorneys. It's continuing legal education credit. Some agencies offer credit for it, some do not. For many agencies, it's completely irrelevant, so it defaults to no CLE credit. But if you are an agency that employs a lot of attorneys, that might be something that you need to be attuned to. So it gives you the option if somebody did get CLE credit, and you click enter. Now, there's also, I have it circled towards the top of the screen, there is an edit button. So if you did make a typo, you can also edit the dates here in the screen by hitting the edit button. So we try to give you some flexibility there. Now, the next one is the Ethics Seminar Refresher Training. So again, you select the names. If somebody has not yet completed the CETC, you won't be able to click their name here. The system will gray it out. So at least got smart enough to figure that out, right? But you click the names of whoever took the training, and that's where you'll see the drop-down box in the lower left-hand corner. It'll say, what class type? Was it the CETC or the ethics seminar? So you indicate that, you enter the date, CLE status if that applies, and click enter. Again, you can edit those dates if you mess them up, but this is the primary function of these screens. But you can see there's all of these screens all nested under this one menu item, so it's kind of a big section. Now, the last radio button, though, is the gift that keeps on giving. I love the upcoming screen. It's like, all right, can I be allowed to geek out a little bit on this? I use the system all the time. I love the upcoming screen. What the upcoming screen does is it allows you to sort your filers by due date and see who's coming due and who's past due. Anybody who has already missed a training deadline, their due date is going to be in red. It's just a quick little visual. And it includes their email address. So you can take this data and download it and use that to create a custom distribution list. If you're doing an upcoming training, you can use this section to go, oh, everybody who's going to be doing like next 6 months, I'm just going to like scoop them up and invite them to this training session. So this upcoming screen can be very useful in terms of monitoring and tracking their training. That's where you got to go. All right, the certification menu, training officers. This allows us to determine who among your staff is actually the one who is managing the training functions. We know that people who are doing the training functions are often not the same people who are managing updates to filers. So we do send out routine training notifications. At least one person in your agency has to have this indicator on. The on indicator just means that you're going to be the one to get notices. But I do want to say, sometimes for large agencies, those notices can be a lot. Your inbox can get flooded, especially with the late notes that go out on the 15th of every month. So if you're the person who has that indicator on, and you're tagged with getting the notices, I just want to remind you, most email systems will allow you to set up a filter to have emails. All of our emails are always going to have the same subject header and come from the same address. You can just have them filtered into a folder where you can check it at your leisure, so it doesn't stays out of your inbox. We're almost done, folks. We're almost there. The next is the reports. There are 3 reports available. 2 of them kind of overlap. So under the first report is the active or inactive filer list. And this report pretty much says what it does. It allows you to either get a list of all active filers in your agency, or if you prefer, you can get a list of all inactive filers in your agency. Boom, you pick, you say run report. Again, all of these reports can be printed or downloaded, okay? Now, the next report is the agency report, very similar, but this one just will give you your active filer list. And the output gives you a little bit more data information than the previous list. So it depends on what you're looking for and what your needs are. We're trying to give you reports that give you some flexibility there. The third report is the ethics officer filers list. This is supposed to list active filers within a specific date range. I honestly tested this report a few weeks ago when I was pulling this up, and the query may not be functioning 100%, or maybe I'm not understanding it. But if you do need information about a specific date range and it's not giving you the right thing, let us know. We'll try to help you figure that out as well. The last menu item is preferences. I said this is a dark system. This is where you can change the color. You didn't realize I would set them up for a long joke, did you? Ha ha. All right, there we go. All right, the preference menu really just is that. It allows you to change the color scheme, but it's also kind of a placeholder that may allow us to add other features in the future. There we go. So.
One more thing, let me mention.
Okay.
I'm always talking when I'm telling them about when people start to freak out.
Okay.
Let me come back up.
Kate briefly mentioned how, our mid-month late notices. Sometimes, as Kate had said, some of your agencies are doing the trainings infrequently. So just remind your folks that they're going to continue to get the late notices, and that's okay. That,
Yes.
there's nothing's going to explode, that they're going to be okay until they're able to get into something. We get a lot of people who are...
Good point. Yeah. Nobody likes getting a naughty note from the ethics agency, and we did not intend those to be naughty notes. We just know that training schedules are so infrequent that it would slip anybody's mind. And so if they've missed a deadline, it's just a courtesy reminder notice, but people panic about it. And I think they're getting a little bit better. But those notices will continue on the 15th of every month until a training completion date is entered. So you can have them stand down. All right. I want to give Melinda one last chance to
Thank you.
offer any words of support.
I'm Melinda Funk. I'm Deputy Director of the Financial Disclosure Unit. I wanted to take this opportunity to let everybody know that within the next week or two, you're going to be getting a notification regarding exempt titles. We are going to start asking the agencies between the date you received the notice and August 1st of this year, any titles that you wish the Commission to review for exemption be submitted to us. Effective January of next year, all current title exemptions will be revoked. So anything that you want, you're going to need to apply for between February and August 1st of this year. And we plan on having all of our determinations out by February of next year. We have so many titles, many don't exist anymore. Many were done in the early stages of the original Ethics Commission back in the 80s. We all know titles have changed, duties have changed within titles, and I think this would be a great way to start fresh, get current job descriptions.
Clean up the data in the system.
Clean everything up. They will remain in effect for this filing. So if you have titles that are exempt now, they will stay exempt. But we'll be getting more information out to you within the next week or two. And any questions, my contact information will be on that notification, so you can get a hold of me directly.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so now you've got a face to the name. So here's our contact information. I say call us because honestly, the filing specialists are really wonderful people. They're very knowledgeable. They're here to help you. Brianna and I in the education and training group will be more than happy to talk to you about any training-related questions. So reach out, use us as a resource, and thank you all very much for being here. I'm sorry for running late. I try really hard not to. So thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you, WebEx.